In local matters, Congresswoman Liz Cheney says she will not be helping Democrats fight Republicans' recent push for new restrictive voting laws. The Wyoming representative recently lost her position as the top House Republican for speaking out against Mr. Trump's claims that the 2020 presidential election was rigged. Cheney blamed the former president for inciting the insurrection at the Capitol. She says Trump should be held accountable for perpetuating the false narrative that voter fraud cost him a second term in the Oval Office. But in an interview with Axios over the weekend, the Congresswoman expressed support for some of the restrictive voting laws proposed by red states nationwide. A recent CBS News poll reveals nearly half of Republicans feel the best way for the party to win elections moving forward is to prioritize changes to the voting system. Joining us now for more on this is politics and policy reporter at WyoFile, Nick Reynolds. Welcome, Nick. Great to have you with us. So, Wyoming Congresswoman Liz Cheney has been a public critic of the former president. She is one of the few Republicans who's repeatedly condemned his false claims that the 2020 election was rigged. So why is she then not speaking out against the wave of red states looking to pass these new restrictive voter laws that seem to be in reaction to this false narrative?
Yeah, and that's an interesting question because it hasn't been too big of a talking issue here. On one side of things, there's a group of people, obviously, who are concerned that she's not speaking enough in favor of them, that she feels that she's just not in line with the rest of what the Republican Party is going for. And we also run into the issue in Wyoming of states' rights. There's a really deep undertone here of states, being able to independently decide policies for themselves. And we often run into that in politics here, where we look at state legislation and their rights over, say, what the federal government wants to do. So there's a little bit of that that's kind of underpinning the undercarriage of national and state Republican politics. On the other hand, we have to look at some of the dynamics in the campaign and in the state. One of her chief opponents, Chuck Gray, is running on his sponsorship of a voter ID bill in the last session that passed pretty resoundingly. And in an earlier GOP event this month, Governor Mark Gordon to the State Central Committee of the Wyoming Republican Party touted his signing of that bill. It's something that we're kind of seeing in the growing nationalization of state houses around the country, that this is just something that I think a lot of people are going to fall in line on, regardless of whether they believe there was fraud or if they just believe that election processes have lost credibility.
So Congresswoman Cheney was ultimately ousted from her leadership position in the House for speaking out against the former president's narrative regarding election fraud. And a recent CBS News poll is showing that more than half of Republicans who agreed with her removal from office say it's because she didn't support the former president. So what does this tell us about the current state of the Republican Party? And can someone like Liz Cheney, who is clearly a conservative and has a very conservative voting record, but not support, the former president? Is there room for a conservative like Liz Cheney in the Republican Party?
Yeah, and it's been an interesting thing to parse through as I've been talking to conservative activists here too, because to some regards, they're saying that her message is almost completely based off of opposing Donald Trump, when that's not exactly the case. We've seen many public statements about her opposing Biden administration policies. She just wrapped up a tour of southeastern Wyoming this week, where she was actually in the community of Pinedale, which is a pretty huge producer of natural gas, as a means to oppose his current pause on federal leasing on federal lands, which is a huge economic issue for us. So she's clearly doing the legwork, but again, we fall into this self-perpetuating issue where most of what people focus on is her opposition to the president. And among a lot of conservative activists, that's seen as a distraction, that's incompatible with the party, and is off message, even if it's not the complete message that she's been pushing out.
Right. So with that in mind, loyal Trump supporter and Wyoming State Senator Anthony Bouchard plans to run against Representative Cheney for her House seat in 2022. As you know, last week, Bouchard revealed that when he was 18 and living in Florida, he impregnated a 14-year-old girl. The two went on to get married a year later. What more can you tell us about this situation, and what has the fallout been following his announcement?
Yeah, so I spoke to Senator Bouchard yesterday for about an hour, and what's been interesting is that he's actually saw a slight uptick in local donations after that event. I've also been looking a little bit. I'm actually waiting until we see the Q2 financial numbers to see what his national fundraising looks like after this, because he has a very, very large base of national support, and he's been pretty combative in his pushback. He owned up to it. Before any articles even were released. I was working on something myself, and he just went on Facebook Live and dropped it, using it to kind of push the narrative in his favor, and also, in a way, I guess, kind of take control of it a little bit. He can put it on the media there and say that there are out-of-state groups looking to get him, and in Wyoming, that's proven to be a pretty winning message over time. People just don't like outside meddling in their politics, and to some degree, an unnamed GOP operative from out of state, that might change people's minds. But at the same time, there are plenty of people in the state who are obviously appalled by the news. I've spoken to several people who don't consider him a serious challenger anymore. And we have to be real that the conservatives in this state, in the recent governor's race, they captured 47% of the vote, while a more moderate candidate ultimately won the primary with about a third of it. They've noticed this and are taking this very seriously. And at this point, some have deemed him as a candidate with too much baggage to credibly represent them in a race. And when you're trying to consolidate the field, a candidate like that might carry too many distractions to be electable. And I've been hearing that quite a bit.
So who else is stepping up to potentially challenge Cheney in 2022? And does the pro-Trump camp appear to be rallying behind any particular candidate at this point?
Yeah, at this point we haven't seen, and that's also a really interesting facet of this race, is that it's mostly in Trump's hands at this point. At recent candidate forums I've attended, the main conversation is, will you step aside if Trump endorses somebody else? And that's really what we're all waiting on right now, is a Trump endorsement. The candidates that have emerged in the early days, Bouchard, of course, was the most credible fundraiser that we had, but the recent revelations have made that a little bit more challenging for him. So we're looking currently at candidates like Chuck Gray, who's a state representative, very solid conservative voting record, has sponsored voting ID and abortion bills, which have passed into law in the state, has a lot of credibility to run on, has been in the legislature for a while, and people are really starting to come around to him. I went to an event last week. He was charming. He was very charismatic, and people seem to respond. Also in there is Darren Smith, who captured a lot of attention during his last campaign in 2016. That was the same race Cheney ran in. He finished with about double digits in that campaign, running a pretty shoestring race. And it depends to see what he learned from that experience. A name that's also been building here is Secretary of State Ed Buchanan, who hasn't declared he was running yet, but there are some national groups that are pushing for him. We've seen Club for Growth sponsoring polls that have named his, they floated his name as a potential candidate. And there have been some other polls in the state that have also been gauging people's favorability of Buchanan too. And there's a couple other interesting facets to this that's going to make it difficult for voters. I mean, we also have some regional considerations to consider. Wyoming is a huge state, about 20 times the size of Connecticut. And when we're looking at a dynamic like that, we're talking about a lot of small towns spread across a very large area. And there's a regional aspect of politics here that requires a lot of travel, a lot of money. And we have candidates in this race right now who may not fit that criteria, but have very strong local followings. Bouchard was one of those before this. He had a very big grasp on Laramie County, which is home to the state's largest city. A new entry into the race, Denton Knapp. He came from California, but has very deep ties to Campbell County. That's another big metropolitan area with Gillette there, and he might have a regional following there. We also have a candidate like Brian Miller, finished third in last year's U.S. Senate race, and he has a strong following around Sheridan as the Sheridan County Republican Party chair. So we have those considerations to think of, and ultimately, we just have to see who people consolidate around. And there's a lot of big personalities in this race. As one person told me last week, you just don't drop out in Wyoming, and we'll be running into that problem, I'm sure.
All right. Well, Nick Reynolds, thank you so much for sharing your copious insight into the Wyoming Republican Party with us. We appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having me.